Hello, and welcome to Scream Scene, the horror movie podcast where we watch every horror movie ever made in chronological order, and then we rank them from best to worst. My name's Ben.
And I'm Sarah.
Thank you for listening to us today, the first Scream Scene episode of 2026.
Happy New Year!
Happy New Year, everybody. We are now in a time period that I would have considered growing up impossibly far in the future. Like 2025 is the future. And so now we're beyond that. And we sort of have like the cyberpunk future, except in like the worst, lamest way.
Yeah. We got the fascism, but not the fashion sense.
Right. We've got like the dumbest possible version of robots taking our jobs. How are you doing today, Sarah?
I'm doing all right. I have been doing a lot of that, reflection at the end of the year and start of a new one. As of recording this, I have finished making my New Year goals and resolutions. I made enough that I can do a bingo card, so I'm really proud of myself for that because it was hard coming up with 24 goals.
That's right. So the rest of you who have only come up with one, you've got 23 more to go.
The idea of the bingo card is like, you can go for the full blackout, the full thing, but you kind of only have to do 5 in a row. So, it's not like I'm doing all of them.
Yeah, you can get any 5 in a row done and feel like you've accomplished the goal.
And give yourself a little treat. What about you, Ben? Do you have any goals for the year?
I don't really know. I haven't really finished reflecting. I've been thinking a lot about how well my resolution from last year went. Not quite sure where I stand going into the new year right now. I'm in that sort of post-Christmas kind of funk a little bit.
Yeah. As of recording, we're in that, half opacity photo and Elrond state between Christmas and New Year's.
Yes, yeah, the liminal space. We're currently so as an example, we usually record the show in our gaming room where we usually play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. But for Christmas, we hosted Christmas dinner this year. So we sort of transformed it into the Christmas dining room. So we took a lot of D&D stuff out of the room to make room for a lot of Christmas stuff. We have since put away all the Christmas stuff, but we have not really put back all the D&D stuff. I feel like this is a great analogy for the post-Christmas liminal space.
Yeah.
So I don't really know where I stand yet. I'll get back to you on it. I've been feeling a little depressed, but I don't know how much of that is actually warranted and how much of that is just that, it's dark outside,
Yeah. Well, we're going to be watching what is probably not a good movie. What are we watching today, Ben?
Probably not. We'll find out. I'll be pleasantly surprised if I enjoy this. Today we are watching Hands of a Stranger from 1962, directed by Newt Arnold.
He got better.
This is the 4th adaptation of Hands of Orlac that we have seen on this show.
That is correct.
We've seen this particular story play out a lot of times. And I remember as of the most recent version, feeling like I was really tired of this story, or feeling at least that it was increasingly becoming a difficult story to tell in the modern world.
I have thoughts on this.
Okay.
Before I get into my thoughts, let me tell the folks at home who may not be familiar with the original story and all of that, let me bring them up to speed. So the Hands of Orlac, the Hands of Orlac, was published in 1920 in France by Maurice Renard. I would describe it as like a mystery thriller with a sci-fi premise, because the story follows the pianist Stephen Orlac after he suffers injuries to his head and hands after a train accident. This very famous doctor, Dr. Sorrell, gives him new hands transplanted from what he learns to be an executed murderer. Stephen goes through depression and begins to have hallucinations and suddenly starts to believe that he is taking on the personality traits and skills and personality traits of that murderer, including suddenly being very good at knife throwing. Now, there's a lot more to this story, but that's kind of the general premise. What I find with the novel and its adaptations is that it gets really bogged down with the weight and baggage of all of these other things. So because he can no longer support his family, we see Stephen's wife struggling with creditors, and then Stephen begins to get blackmailed by this mysterious figure who reveals himself to Stephen to be the murderer who is not dead. And then as we dig further into the mystery, it turns out this guy who's posing as the murderer is actually the murderer's accomplice who is trying to, I don't think gaslight is exactly the right word here, but make Stephen think that yes, he is adapting or adopting some of these personality traits and therefore needs to pay blackmail to this accomplice. Of course, police come in at the end of the day. It turns out that the hands are not from a murderer. You're fine. It was all in your head. All of that baggage is kind of best seen in the film adaptation that came first in 1924. It's called Orlac's Hand because it's a German expressionist movie from Robert Wiener and stars Conrad Veidt. And we really praise that movie. You can hear all about it in episode 12. So way back when.
Yeah.
It's from 1924. It's been a while.
Early days.
Conrad Veidt does a really good job of handling expressing the descent into madness and paranoia about where did these hands come from. But the movie still includes following his wife struggling with the debt, this stuff with his dad. His dad ends up murdered, all of this running around that comes from that mystery thriller aspect of the novel. And that really hinders its horror aspect. The next adaptation came in 1935 with Colin Clive in the pianist role, in the Stephen Orlac role, but with Peter Lorre as kind of the breakout star there as the mad scientist. Mad Love was directed by Carl Freund, so it has a lot of that dark, moody atmosphere, and it's from America, but it still brings in that expressionist aesthetic, which we really praised. You can hear all about that in episode 52. They change a bit about how the doctor is the villain. So he's the one who's trying to convince Stephen about where these hands came from and do the blackmail because he wants Stephen's wife. But it's still bogged down with having to handle all of this baggage. And then the next adaptation we watched came from 1960 with Mel Ferrer as Stephen Orlac. I don't know if that's his actual name in the movie, now that I think of it, but in the pianist role. And that movie is just called The Hands of Orlac, though it is a French adaptation, which is great, and from director Edmond Greville. We covered that in episode 311, and it was pretty much a letdown. I remember particularly for me because I was like, oh, this is like a French novel. This is a French adaptation. What will they do? And they don't really handle any of it well. So to the point where the 1960 version ended up not ranking. And in fact, the 1935 version, even with its changes to the novel and the plot and everything, ranks the highest at 61 because it tries to bring a lot of that weird horror sci-fi mystery thriller stuff together by simplifying all of the characters. The very first adaptation from 1924 ranks at 159. Not a bad showing, but you can really see the stark difference between 159 and 61 on the list.
Yeah, I think the main thing the 1960 version had going for it was Christopher Lee in the villain role.
Yeah.
But all of these versions have had a hard time with, you have this central premise of this pianist who gets this hand transplant, and the hands are from a murderer, so he's worried that he's going to become a murderer now because he's got a murderer's hands and he can't play piano anymore. Like, that's your central premise, as you said. And it's like a strong-ish central premise, but then you have to like go, okay, why does he think that? What happens in the story to make him think that?
Yeah.
You have to make a choice about like, is he actually turning evil because of his hands, or is it all in his head? If it's all in his head, then like, who's pushing him to think this and why? And so you have like the complicated blackmail plot of the original. You have the mad scientist who wants to steal his wife plot of the American version. The French version somehow made the blackmail plot even more
disconnected.
Yeah, and complicated. And something I brought up in our coverage of that 1960 version is that one of the key parts of the story that informs Orlac's uncertainty about what has happened to him is that like he has this accident, he's put under, he wakes up, and he has new hands. And where did these hands come from? And, oh, are they from this murderer who used his hands to kill people? And if so, am I going to become like that guy? In the 1960 version, it's even played as like he's not sure if he got a hand transplant or not.
Yeah, it's just surgery.
Which is like, how do you not know? Anyways, the point is that as we get further along into modern times, the idea of a doctor just kind of like doing an extremely experimental, weird surgery on you without you knowing or having any kind of approval or understanding of what happened becomes like more and more far-fetched.
For our white main characters.
Yes, for white men, for rich, famous white men. Yes.
Just to, put that out there. But yeah, so the fact that like you set up at the end of the last episode that Hands of a Stranger is not an official adaptation. Mm-hmm. So I'm very curious to hear how much of that baggage do they pull along, or do they just go with that central premise? And if being an unofficial adaptation frees them into being perhaps the best adaptation of that premise.
Yeah, we're going to have to see. I am kind of hopeful for that. I am hopeful that by not being an official adaptation, they can finally make the movie that all of these other movies have like teased. Yes,
yeah.
But never actually been, right? Yeah, it's worth noting that by this time, like a lot of the ideas and laws around like informed consent and making sure your patient knows what you're doing to them when you do it had really started to come around as a result of like the post-war period and reaction to like the Nazi experimentations that happened under Joseph Mengele and all of that kind of stuff in the Nuremberg trials. And so like in 1947, the Nuremberg Code was established, which is like a code of behaviors and ethics around the ideas of informed consent. Mm-hmm. They weren't legally binding, however. The Declaration of Helsinki, which was a legal principle that upheld patient consent, was ratified in 1964. So after this movie. And so like, that's one of the things that I think makes this story harder to adapt as you go into the future. The other thing I think that makes it harder to adapt is our knowledge of how the human body and the human brain work has been improved. Like when the novel was written in 1920, transplants were a very new idea.
Yeah.
And there was like a lot of like uncertainty around like, how much are you still you if you get a transplant from someone else, right? And I feel like transplants have become so normalized, not hand transplants, but other kinds of transplants, to the point where we don't really like think about that much anymore. I know that neurologists have done a bunch of studies that have shown that like your piano skills aren't in your hands.
Yeah.
They're in your mind. And, you know, if you do have like an injury or something, and your hands were repaired by surgery, it would just be like, you know, some physical therapy, but you wouldn't lose the ability.
There is interesting anecdotal evidence of aspects of the donator coming through, like their personality and their likes and dislikes coming through to the receiver. The one case that I'm thinking of in particular, this is just off the top of my head, so I might get some details incorrect, but it was a young student who really enjoyed classical music, died, and his heart went to like an older gentleman, let's say 50. And after that, the older gentleman had an increased like of classical music, whereas before he had shown no particular interest towards it. So anecdotal things like that. I think that there's something around muscle memory, just speaking to my own beliefs. I don't think that it's like a personality trait or something that like truly someone, if you get hands from a murderer, you will become a murderer. I think it's about muscle memory and thinking about like the way that you have a physical reaction to music and I think continuing through.
Sure. I think the thing is that we have kind of as human beings this sense of like different parts of us are kept in different parts of our body. Like our romance comes from our heart, you know, our sense of hunger comes from our stomach. And what these studies on pianists have shown is that like that muscle memory you're referring to is still memory. It's still in your brain.
Yeah. And so like it would also just be like getting those new hands, those muscles used to moving that way.
Yeah. Rather than the idea that like, oh, you've lost the ability because you don't have the hands anymore. Right.
Yeah.
Anyways, so this fourth unofficial adaptation, it gives no credit to Maurice Renard, and all of the character names have been changed.
Okay.
And it was filmed in 1960.
Oh, why is it only coming out now?
To avoid competition with the 1960 French version with Christopher Lee, which was released dubbed into French and English. And yeah, they like didn't want any heat from that. This is a much lower budget version. The budget for this movie was $168,000. So in a situation like that, they felt that this movie's best chance would be to be released such that it wouldn't have competition from like what was perceived as like a more prestigious version.
Sure. I think there's also the element of we don't necessarily want to draw attention to us being a Hands of Orlac adaptation. And so coming out at the same time as one, it would just kind of be drawing much more visible connections.
Yeah, for sure. You're not in the like Transmorphers era where there's money to be made in confusing people. It's much more about like more people are going to go to see this other one. That'll draw business away from our movie. Our movie's lower budget. It can't afford to lose that business, etc. So they held it till 1962. This movie was produced, directed, and written by Newt Arnold.
Oh, wow. Triple threat.
For this one movie, yes. He had a very interesting career. It's kind of backwards from a lot of people. So he was born in 1922, and Hands of a Stranger was his first feature film as a writer, producer, and director. He had like an associate producer credit before this. He had some like assistant credits before this. He had some TV writing credits before this, but then he just like comes out of the gate producing, writing, and directing this movie. And then after this, he spent the majority of his career as an assistant director.
Oh.
Like he moved down a notch. He was an AD on a lot of movies, including In the Heat of the Night.
Oh, Oh, nice. That's a great movie.
The Godfather Part 2.
Oh, okay.
Sorcerer, Blade Runner, The Abyss, Rules of Engagement. He also was second unit director on a lot of movies, such as The Goonies, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, The Secret of the Ooze.
So it sounds like he was like, that triple threat approach was too much. And being a director, that's too much responsibility. I got to get out of this. I shall be assistant director.
Yeah, this guy was like, I want to be paid to come to work and do a job.
Yeah.
I do not want to be responsible for everything that's happening on this set. He did direct only two other movies in his entire career. One of which was 1971's Bloodthirst, a cult classic Filipino horror movie. And the other was 1988's Bloodsport, starring Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Oh, so I've seen his work before.
Yes.
You might call me a Newt connoisseur.
You have seen a full 1/3 of all of his directorial filmography.
Wow. I don't know if I can say that about any other director.
Right. After this, you'll have seen 2/3.
Wow. I'm a big Bloodsport fan. It's not a good movie, and in fact, it is racist. But I enjoy seeing big men fight.
Yep. It's true. Newt Arnold passed away in 2000.
Okay.
Leading the cast is 34-year-old actor Paul Lukather, who plays pianist Vernon Paris. Later in his career, Lukather became known as a voice actor. He played the role of Vorador in the Legacy of Kain video game series.
Like Cain from Cain and Abel?
Yeah, kind of. It's like you're a vampire in some of them.
Oh, okay. I can see the connection now.
Anyways, Lukather passed away in 2014. Another actor in the cast who went on to be a successful voice actor is Michael Rye, who went on to voice a number of cartoon characters through the 70s and 80s, such as Green Lantern on Super Friends. There's also a number of actors in this movie who have very minor roles who went on to bigger things. Most notably, there's Sally Kellerman, who appears in this movie in the small role of Sue, but would go on to earn a Best Supporting Actress nomination for her role in MASH.
Okay.
You would probably best know her, and by that I mean I also best know her as playing the role of Dr. Danner in the second Star Trek pilot, Where No Man Has Gone Before, where the two people get silver eyes and godlike powers.
Oh.
She's the blonde who gets the silver eyes and the godlike powers. Yeah. A very young Barry Gordon appears in this movie, is introduced in this movie in the role of Skeet. He would go on to voice Donatello in the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon, and would be the longest serving president of SAG from 1988 to 1995.
Cool.
Finally, there is pinup model Irish McCalla, who would have been best known at the time as the star of the 1950s TV show Sheena, Queen of the Jungle, where she played a kind of female Tarzan.
Yeah.
So Hands of a Stranger was released on April 22nd, 1962.
Any reason why they chose April? Because they had an option. They were already holding it, right?
Yeah,
so they could have chosen March or October.
I don't really know. In the days before the wide release trend, I don't really know what the significance of different parts of the film calendar were like. Nowadays we have this very kind of set
summer blockbuster, December Oscar.
Yeah, exactly. January, February is kind of like the dumping ground. Yeah.
But Ben, the Bad Dracula comes out in February.
But yeah, I don't really know in this case. What I do know is that after this came out in the late 60s, it was purchased. So this was Allied Artists. Allied Artists released this.
Okay.
And we know Allied Artists, they used to be Monogram back in the day. In the late 60s, their library their post 1948 library or something like that, was purchased by Lorimar, which was a TV production company. And so Hands of a Stranger did the rounds on late night TV for a long time, to the point where I think if you are a certain generation of American, this might be the most familiar version of the Hands of Orlac premise compared to like a silent German movie or, you know, the other two adaptations. I feel like this version got like referenced a lot in sort of pop culture versions of this story, except for like Mad Love. Mad Love's, I think, a little more famous. But because of that, Lorimar got bought in 1989 by Warner Brothers. So this got 2 DVD releases, one in 2003 from Alpha Video, which we will not speak of again, and then another in 2013 by the Warner Archive Collection.
Okay. Well, folks, that's how you can find a copy to watch along. Hopefully you can find it, and we will let you know if it's worth the effort. You're going to hear a brief musical interlude, and when you come back, we will discuss Hands of a Stranger from 1962, directed by Newt Arnold.
See you on the other side, everybody.
Welcome back to Scream Scene. We just finished watching Hands of a Stranger from 1962, directed by Newt Arnold. Ben, what are your first thoughts?
I loved this. I thought this was great.
Yeah, I could tell you really got into it.
Yeah.
Every part of this movie, including the acting, the dialogue, it's dialed up to 11. So it's a lot all the time.
That's true.
All at once. And yeah, I think it did a fairly good job of handling that. Very focused in handling that. I do think it didn't have enough scares that kind of allowed for a release of that energy for me. So I left the movie feeling very, I don't want to say like anxious or uptight. I just had a lot of that tension in my chest from all of it that it didn't really provide a good release.
I think this is the best version of this story so far. I think it fixes basically all of my problems with Hands of Orlac. But I do think it does have like its own problems.
Yeah. Well, why don't I tell the folks at home what happens?
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think the fact that it's an unofficial adaptation means that it can shrug off some of that baggage. So it is a bit more of a streamlined plot here. It opens with a very noir scene of this man in like the trench coat and the fedora and a briefcase leaving, and a car coming up behind him slowly and then doing a bit of a drive-by shooting him multiple times. And despite the efforts of Dr. Harding and his team, the man is declared dead during surgery. Meanwhile, we see pianist Vernon Paris as he finishes a great performance, and as he is on his way to an after-party in a cab, they get into a car accident. So his hands are mangled. We unfortunately don't get to see what they look like, so that's kind of left up to the imagination. Now, Vernon's agent, George, is here, and he impresses on Dr. Harding about the importance of Vernon's hands, because Dr. Harding is like, these are so bad, we just need to amputate. Hearing the importance, Dr. Harding goes, okay, well, we have this guy who came in 2 hours before who died from bullet wounds, and he had very strong hands. So why don't we do a transplant?
Crucially, this guy is been dead only for like 2 hours, to the point where the police still don't know who he is or anything about him or why he was killed.
Yeah, he's a stranger.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we do get some lines here about Dr. Harding acting without consent of the patient. I think, someone who knows more about legal things and medical legal things would be able to say that, George or Vernon's next of kin, his sister Dina, would be able to provide consent in this case because of Vernon being unconscious. But in any case, we do get some lines about, we're doing this without consent.
Yeah, I think it's explicitly stated later that they didn't ask Dina, that Dina's the person they should have asked, which is part of why she's so pissed off.
When
later,
she's told.
Yeah, it's more George who gives the go-ahead for this.
And even then, he's heavily pressured about, it's either no hands or these hands.
Yeah.
It's also made clear that this is a very experimental surgery. Like, they don't actually know if it's going to work. There's a slight chance it could. So it's basically a slight chance or nothing at all.
Yeah.
One thing they don't talk about is consent for the stranger.
Mm-hmm.
Because dead bodies, someone needs to provide consent for that as well. You can't touch the body if there's no thing that says, I donate my body to science, I donate my organs, any of that. Like, you legally can't do that. But in any case, because we brought it up in the context setting and they bring up a line about Vernon's consent, I just thought it was important to note.
And I think that's why I noted that we don't know who the body is. The police don't know who the body is, because when the body does show up at the morgue without hands, the police are upset about it.
So, as we kind of said, Vernon's sister Dina is distraught about the surgery. She's told, after they've already done the transplant, but she does get to see the actual hands, like the mangled original hands. So it kind of impresses upon her that there was no other option, really. So while Vernon recovers, Dr. Harding does get some scenes with a Lieutenant Sims. So this is where Ben's coming from, where Sims is like, hey, when a body shows up to the morgue, we usually expect all of it to show up. Where are the hands? And Harding saying, trust me, just give me a few weeks. I'm doing a thing for science, expressing all of this in a very soap opera way and talking about if you had a chance to just give me 2 months and I could revolutionize the field, wouldn't you? Just a little intense.
Yeah, everyone in this movie gets monologues about themselves and their backstory and their motivations and why they're doing what they're doing that are feel designed to be audition monologues for actors. They are intense and they allow the actors to swing for the fences with basically every line of dialogue.
Yeah. And when Ben says every actor, he means every actor. The lieutenant, the 2 separate assistant doctors, the nurse gets a couple lines, and they're all swinging for the fences.
Every character in this movie is written like they are the main character of this movie.
So that's what I mean when I say I came away from this movie with it being a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Harding does give Sims fingerprints of the stranger's hands, so that way he can at least, continue on with his own homicide investigation. But Sims does give Harding some leeway here, some space. So 6 weeks later, and Vernon is pretty much recovered in the sense that the body has accepted the hands. And so they do some tests and we see that he has some slow dexterity responses. And this is when he gets told about the transplant and he is very upset. Vernon basically sees this as my life and my identity were my hands and now that is gone. Mm-hmm. It's someone else's identity. So he's struggling psychologically. He goes to his old flame. She's a bit of a party girl. And he basically goes to her to be like, hey, I know we were both flings on both of our sides, but I really need some support right now. And she's like, dude, you should have thought about that when I wanted that and you said no. Mm-hmm. Basically, hand waves him away. They fight. And she had set up this nice dinner because she's expecting a caller. And as they fight, the candles fall over, ignite her dress, and she goes floof up in flames.
And he does nothing to
He's a
save
little
her.
shocked. He's like, what the fuck is happening? And then, yeah, just kind of like leaves. As we continue to wait about news of who this donor was, Dina and Harding get closer. They are our love interest here. And Vernon increasingly gets upset about his hands. He decides to go to the cab driver's house to confront him. Now, in the scene with the cab driver, this is also like what Ben means of like every character gets a thing. The cab driver in that scene gets to explain like, here's my backstory. I'm a single father because my wife died and we have a little son and he loves playing the piano, but he's not a sissy. He likes playing sports. Like so much.
They get into the car accident because the cab driver is showing Vernon a picture of his piano playing son.
Yeah. So he goes to the cab driver's house to confront him. And cab driver isn't there, but the son is. This is Skeet. Yeah, Skeet. I was going to say Skeeter, but no, that's Saved by the Bell.
No, that's Doug.
No, there is a guy.
Skeeter is Doug. The guy on Saved by the Bell is Screech.
Anyways.
This is Skeet.
This is Skeet.
He grows up to play Donatello.
And be president of SEG.
Yes.
Good for him. So he's like 10 here. And he's like, oh, a stranger. Sure, I'll let you into my house. You're waiting for my dad. Let me show you the piano. And he shows, Vernon how well he plays. The film cuts around it in a very humorous way. And so Skeet's like, well, what about you, mister? Why don't you play the piano? Vernon tries. It goes poorly. And he gets really upset and really mad. And he grabs Skeet's hands and crushes them. Kid is screaming and trying to pull away with such force that when he finally gets loose, he hits his head on the corner of the piano and falls on the floor. He's dead. This is just as the cab driver arrives home. But we see that from the accident, he is blind.
Which means he would have lost his livelihood.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Anyways, it also means that Vernon can escape.
Yes. So he gets out of there. Now, Vernon, crucially, does not tell anyone about going to see his girlfriend or seeing the kid or anything like that. They do hear about the girlfriend dying, but there's no connection as far as we can see between Vernon and the girlfriend or the kid.
Yeah, you know that running gag in Monty Python and the Holy Grail where the cops show up when everyone has died and they're sort of following the lead characters. Yeah, it's kind of like that with the police lieutenant. He just shows up every once in a while to talk to the doctor and he's like, yeah, and we've got all these bodies on our hands now too.
Yes, it's very much that vibe. Because Vernon hasn't shared any of this, Dina and Harding think Vernon is adjusting quite well. So they decide to all go on a date to a carnival. Great place. When Vernon can't throw these baseballs at clown faces at this carnival game, he gets upset with the carny. They end up fighting. Harding has to pull them off from each other. And then Vernon also sees this weird funhouse mirror that makes his hands look all big. It's the mirror that Donald Trump would like to have. And this seems to shift Vernon's psychology to revenge. So it's a few weeks or days or something like that later, and Dina believes that Vernon is practicing and doing very well with his recovery, when in actuality, Vernon is sneaking out, and he goes and he kills one of those assisting doctors and his girlfriend.
The girlfriend's played by Sally Kellerman.
And they also get a full fucking scene of when are we getting married?
Yeah.
Oh, I could work. I don't mind being a working wife, and just this whole thing.
Everybody gets a backstory.
Lieutenant Sims is now suspicious because he's the assisting doctor and his girlfriend are dead. The assisting doctor's hands are also crushed, just like the cab driver's son. One of these could have been one-offs, whatever. But this is now a pattern. And so he goes to Harding and the other assistant doctor to be like, hey guys, what's up?
I really like this scene because the police lieutenant is like, yeah, so, it's the cab driver from that cab that got into the accident, and it's, your assistant or whatever. And there's all this focus on hands. And I'm just saying, I think I know what happened to those hands that were missing from that body, Doc. And if it's what I think, it was a damn good bit of surgery.
He does say exactly that. It's like, good job. You read the script, so we don't need to spend time catching you up. Harding is like, don't worry, Lieutenant, you keep investigating. They also still don't know who the donor was. Still nothing's coming up. And then Harding turns to his assistant doctor and they decide, like, no, we'll handle this ourselves. But wait, what about Dina? So Harding travels to go check in on Dina. But in fact, it's actually a little too late because Vernon attacks that assistant doctor in his car. And then Dina and Harding find Vernon at the concert hall with the dead assistant doctor. So Harding and Vernon end up fighting, and then we see Vernon is actually shot by Sims, who has been trailing along this whole time. The end. It's like, I feel like my summation of that climax was like very quick. The movie does not play it that quick. Like everything else in this movie, it takes its sweet time to really chew the scenery of every moment.
Sure.
I do like that we never actually learn about the donor.
Yes, that's brought up at the very end where it's like, did you ever find out who those hands came from? And the detective's like, does it matter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the key way that it simplifies from Hands of Orlac. It doesn't matter who gave the hands.
Yeah.
Like none of that matters. There's no blackmail. It's just purely focused on the fact that someone is freaking out because their identity was their hands and now they've lost that.
Yeah. This is a movie where it feels like Newt Arnold. I don't know a lot about the production of this movie. Otherwise, I would have said more in the context setting.
Yeah.
But if I had to guess, this feels like a moment where Newt Arnold knew he had a chance to make a feature film and didn't know if he would ever get that chance again. Like, this is 8 Mile. This is like, if you had one shot,
Mom's spaghetti.
Exactly. Because he has put like everything into this. I think one of the reasons I was so impressed and enthralled by this, where you were like overwhelmed and exhausted by it, is I was expecting a low effort cash in programmer of the kind we have now seen dozens and dozens of, where the camera's set up proscenium and the lighting is flat and, everyone's just sort of standing, looking 3/4 profile at each other, saying their lines, and it's very low energy and we get it over with in 60 minutes and we're out of here. And I think because I was expecting that and got way more, I was super impressed. And I think because you were expecting that and got way more, it was a little bit more than what you were like ready for.
I think it just like there's no lull. And there have been movies that we've covered in the past where like they go for it right at the top and that means that they have nowhere else to go. Somehow this movie manages to sustain that and also build at times. But I'm just like, I'm so tired from all of this energy. I completely agree with you. Like, I would recommend people see this movie. I think it's well shot. I think the editing of it is also really well handled.
It does some like Lisa Needs Braces style montages that actually work.
Yes, very much. And the music absolutely, I think, is a key part for how it manages to uphold and sustain the intensity.
Yeah, it's not just Newt Arnold. Everyone is giving it everything they got in this movie.
Thematically, it's so tight.
Yes, it's thematically really tight. Every character, like I said, is written like they are the main character with a full backstory and a rich inner life and like complex motivations. Every actor is performing like this scene is their Oscar clip. I think the thing is it feels like Newt Arnold went to some writing classes or went to some workshops and, you know, got a lot of advice about like there are no throwaway parts and like give every character like their own inner life and all of this stuff. And that's all really good. But the movie ends up almost being like an example of why you don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because like it is a little much when like the nurse who's in 2 scenes and like normally in a normal movie would not have a name or any lines of dialogue. In this movie has a name, has dialogue, has the hint that like she's into Dr. Harding, but they both know it would never work. Like she has kind of a money penny thing going with him.
Yeah,
like,
some like witty remarks about things.
Yeah. But like when every character gets that, it's like it's a lot.
Yeah, the thing about like ensemble movies is or like even ensemble television shows. Like I'm thinking Star Trek, or we watched Wake Up Dead Man, so ensemble movies are also on my brain. Like they each have a moment, but you have a much more scaled down cast or the time to go really into them with like a series, right? This is an hour and 20 minutes, and we don't have a lot of time with a lot of these characters. Like the 3 people who really matter here are Harding, Vernon, and Dina. And we don't need all of the other stuff, but it does help pad it out because it is so streamlined.
Yeah, and I think it makes it really unique because it shows you that the movie cares about all these characters, which is a honestly effective thing for a horror movie where all these characters are getting murdered to do, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think the cast like know that this is all their big chance, like because they are all performing the hell out of these scenes.
Part of me is also wondering if for Newt Arnold, he's like, this is a chance. This is my one shot. And so he's like, hey, everyone else, this is also going to be your shot.
Yeah, like that's why I say he's like directing the hell out of this. And in addition to writing the hell out of it, I do have to issue a correction for something I said in the context setting. I said that Paul Lukather played Vernon Paris. I was mistaken. Paul Lukather is top billed, which is why I assumed he was Vernon. He plays Dr. Gil Harding. So that's a key thing to know. Dr. Harding has top bill in this movie. Vernon Paris is played by James Noah, who is credited here as James Stapleton. Dr. Harding looks like, to me, Christopher Lambert. And James Noah looks like, I can't quite put my finger on it, but he has like this really familiar, he's really handsome in a really familiar way. He has a very pointy chin. I'm not sure.
Very tan.
I'm not sure who he's reminding me of. I have seen him before, but he's not reminding me of himself because the 2 other places I've seen him is he's on an episode of Deep Space Nine and an episode of Voyager in the 90s where he's old and he doesn't look anything like this anymore.
Does he still have his tan?
I don't think so. He has spots because he's a Trill on Deep Space Nine.
Oh, fun. Trill are the best. I see where you're coming at with like the Christopher Lambert thing for Harding, but it's like Christopher Lambert if he was playing Mr. Fantastic because of the like haircut and the gray sideburns.
As I said, I think the whole cast is delivering here, but I especially love that Lukather's Harding thinks he's the hero of like an Ayn Rand story. Like all of his dialogue is about how like I am the doctor who's going to push medical science like into the future. And if you're not willing to come with me on this journey to increase man's knowledge and truth and beauty and science, then like you should just step out right now because we have to believe in the truth of science and beauty.
And he's not villainous for it.
True.
At the end, like they keep talking about like Harding's genius means that Vernon's genius on the piano can continue. And at no point is it like, but Harding went where man was not meant to go.
No.
It was good for him to push those limits. But if anything, it was just bad that he didn't get consent.
Yeah, like even the detective at the end is like, I don't know, Doc, like men like you who are willing to grow, like we need more of you when like Harding's kind of feeling sad for himself at the end.
Yeah.
There is a lot right at the start where like Dina and Vernon are like, you're a mad scientist, you're a monster, you're doing all kinds of crazy shit. And he's like, it's hilarious. There's this moment early on where Dina's like, do you even know like where those hands came from? And Harding's like, what? Because you think that maybe if the hands came from some sort of psychopathic killer, it would lead to your brother becoming some sort of psychopathic killer? Because there's absolutely no evidence that that would ever happen. That's complete nonsense. Listen to me and the science.
And it's like, but that's the story.
Yeah.
Why are we here then?
Meanwhile, I love Paris in this movie because James Noah's Paris is just a hair's breadth away from being a Batman villain.
Yeah.
Like, this whole movie feels like a Steve Ditko comic.
Sure.
Like, it feels like Mr. A is going to show up at some point and talk about how, like, if you taint beauty with ugliness, then you've mixed black and white and good becomes evil and therefore you have, like, sinned and must be punished or whatever. Like, that's what this movie feels like. As you said, it begins with, like, a perfect film noir mob hit.
Yeah.
At the start. The movie shows an excellent sense of dramatic and stylish direction. You mentioned how thematically tight it is.
Hands everywhere.
Yes. There's this repetition of hands-based visuals all through the movie, which like can get a little repetitive, but also shows that like Arnold understands what the movie's about.
Yes.
He gets what the story is. And I think that if it's a little over the top and if it's a little repetitive and if it lacks subtlety, if it's a little like, yeah, we get it, keeping in mind that this is from a first-time filmmaker, this is both ambitious and really confident feeling.
Yeah.
Given the low budget that it's on.
Yeah, I agree. It feels very confident. So I'm curious, do you have any information about how well it did?
I don't. I have to assume it did poorly only because, you know, Newt Arnold didn't direct another movie until 1971. No one in this movie went on to be a big star except for Sally Kellerman, and she didn't go on to be a big star because of this movie. She's in a very small role. So, like, I have to assume it didn't make a big splash, which is unfortunate. I think, honestly, because I think this showed a great promise. And if there are downsides to it, they are things that probably would have been smoothed out in like a sophomore effort. Because I do agree with you that there is a downside. And I do agree with you that the downside is that everyone in this movie is super intense and hardcore and ready to drop a monologue about truth and beauty at a moment's notice. And if you aren't ready to be in that gear of storytelling, it can be a lot. I was like ready for it and there for it, and you weren't. And so it was a little exhausting for you. And I think that's fair.
And I think that like we should have gotten a bit more gore or horror or something. Like the only violence that we see on screen, with the asterisk of that chick going into flames, is him strangling people. And it's very like, and then like they die.
Yeah.
Right? And while the appearance of Vernon in those death scenes feels very like, I kept thinking of Halloween guy. Michael Myers. The way he just like is like in the background and then just comes.
He pops out in the back seat of the guy's car.
Oh, it's so good. But like there's not enough like horror parts. This is horror. I don't want to confuse. But I wish it went a little further so that way there would be more release from that intensity.
It's too bad that strangling has been this like go-to move for movie murderers for so long because of censorship concerns, because of course he's going to strangle people. Like it's Hands, baby. But it is like not as intense as maybe you want. I think we needed to see him murder the doctor and the fiance, and we don't. I also am willing to say that I think the ending's a bit weak.
Yeah.
He kills one of these doctors, and Dina and Harding find out that all the times that they've been hearing him practicing, he's been putting on a record of himself from like the other room, and he can't play, or at least he thinks he can't play, right? And the fact is that like when he puts on the record, even Dr. Harding is like, wow, that's an amazing amount of improvement in a super short time. And I'll put a pin in that. I'll come back to that later. But like, he fakes them out. They find him at the concert hall with the dead doctor. He demonstrates to Harding, like, see, I can't play the piano. Like, see me try. And he's just banging on the keys. And then he goes to strangle Harding. And Dina's just kind of standing there screaming. And then he gets shot by Lieutenant Sims. And I think, frankly, so there's a whole thing. Again, everyone in this movie has a super involved backstory and character motivation. There's this whole thing in the movie where, so Dina is serving the role in the story that Orlac's wife normally does, but here she's a sister.
So she can have a love story.
Right. And there's a whole thing where it's explained that like their parents died and they were brought up by like an aunt and uncle who sucked, and they depended on one another growing up, and they've continued that dependence through their whole lives. And they were hoping that one day he would get successful enough that he wouldn't need her around as much anymore, so she could go off and have her own life. But he keeps falling for these women who are kind of like in it for like the fame and the parties and the money, but aren't really in it for the emotional support. See Eileen, who burns to death. And so there's this codependency thing. And now that he's been injured, he needs her around even more than ever, and whatever. And so I feel like narratively, the ending should have been her shooting him. Like Dina should have shot him, and then that's her letting go of her brother who she's been codependent with in favor of this man she's fallen in love with, or who she can go off and have her own life with. And while it makes sense that Lieutenant Sims shows up and saves the day at the end, because we've been seeing him the whole movie, you kind of get the feeling like he's the protagonist of his own murder mystery movie that's been happening just off screen.
The way he approaches questioning as well really reminds me of Columbo. Like,
yeah.
He has this line of like, you know, once something gets into my brain, I can't let it go. So where are these hands? And
he talks a lot about his wife and child as like a deflecting mechanism.
Yeah. So I'm just like, oh, over here is Sims as Columbo.
Right. Exactly. But the fact is that once you take a step back, you realize that the only reason Sims is in the movie is to show up and shoot Vernon at the end, because he doesn't solve like any of the mysteries, and all of the mysteries don't matter, right? Yeah. So I feel like the movie would have been stronger if Dina had shot him, and I think that would have given the better catharsis that you were looking for. I think when Sims shows up and shoots him, there's no catharsis. It's just kind of a, oh.
Yeah, that's to be expected.
Yeah. So I think that's part of the problem here.
You put a pin in a thing earlier about Vernon's recovery and playing.
Yes. Okay. So now I do want to talk about in a bit more detail how this movie solves all of my problems with Hands of Orlac as a story, even though I think it, has its own problems. So we talked about already, this movie solves the informed consent problem. It also solves the what happened to my hands problem. It solves the, is it his hands or is it all in his head problem. It solves the complicated blackmail problem, and it solves the what do you do with this good premise problem. And it does it all by just ditching all the gaslighting and making who the hands come from irrelevant, and by having the pianist character actually kill people.
Yeah. Because
going mad over the existential horror of what he's been through is enough. You don't need the rest of it. Lord, how I have waited for an Orlac movie where he actually kills people. Because the whole thing of did I kill those people somehow without realizing it while I was maybe asleep or blacked out or something? Because maybe these hands might have come from a murderer and maybe that's influencing me somehow, is a really convoluted, far-fetched idea.
That I think works in literature.
And it works in a 1920 silent movie. But by 1960, yeah, it makes sense that right away the doctor lampshades it and is that's stupid. And it doesn't matter whether the hands came from a killer or not. It's kind of, in my opinion, implied they came from a criminal because the murder at the start feels like a mob hit, but it doesn't matter. It's not important. What's also not important is how well can he play?
Yeah.
In past movies, and I think the 1960 movie is the worst offender for this, but they're all kind of bad for this. For one thing, I love that this movie sidesteps any question of like, what happened to my hands? The doctor does lie to him until they take the bandages off. He's like, don't tell him that we did a hand transplant. But they only keep that until the bandages come off because they don't want the body to reject the hands and they feel there's a psychological component, right? But of course he has to tell him once he takes the bandages off, he has giant scars on his wrists.
Yeah.
And like that weren't there in the previous adaptation, which made no sense, right? And for once, one of these movies acknowledges that like, yeah, you'd be able to tell pretty quickly if those weren't your hands or not. So like they got that out of the way, which I love. And then in the previous movies, they would show Orlac practicing and he would do really, really well. And then he'd be like, I suck. And like the support characters would be like, that sounded great. And he's like, yeah, but not good enough. And in this movie, they acknowledge like, you will get better. You can get better. It's going to take time and physical therapy. And he's just really impatient with that to the point where even after like 2-3 months, when he's using the record to fake that he's been getting better, the doctor is like, no, that's too good for this point in the process. So he's convinced that the experiment, the surgery was botched because when he tries to play, it's like, blank, 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 blank. But like how much of that is A, he hasn't been practicing. He hasn't been doing the exercises because B, he doesn't believe and he doesn't think he's getting better. And so he's not trying. And so this whole thing at the end where he's like, see, doctor, your shit failed. I can't play the piano. This movie makes it clear that like Orlac's problem is not that he's been driven to insanity because of an overcomplicated gaslighting blackmail situation, but that he's been driven to insanity because having his hands replaced with someone else's hands is fucked up.
Yeah.
And that's so much simpler and so much better. And I'm so glad that he actually kills some people. Like,
yeah.
And that he turns into a villain. Like, that works so much better. It works so much better than making the doctor the villain. It works so much better than making a completely unrelated circus performer magician guy the villain. Like, yeah, it's like they've simplified the story, gotten rid of a lot of extraneous characters, and then, as you said, gave everyone who was left a long backstory. But ultimately, I really loved this. And you cannot stop me. I thought this was really good.
No, I'm not going to stop you. I think this is a good point to transition into ranking.
All right.
So I said them before, but to call out some waypoints here. So the 1924 Hands of Orlac is at number 159. The 1935 Mad Love is at number 61. And the 1960 Hands of Orlac did not rank.
Because it was bad.
Yeah, I think in that one too, it was like never answered of whether he actually got a transplant or not. It was
Correct.
Just all in his head.
And they also totally botched the main big scare moment of the story, which this movie straight up didn't have, but that's only because this movie ditched that entire plot line, which is fine. That plot line's always been the worst part of the story.
Yeah. So why don't you go first?
Okay, so I wasn't sure how this post-analysis would go because I did get the impression watching it that you were very exhausted by this movie, whereas I was like, hell yeah. So I was like, all right, who knows? So this might be a little high. We'll see. As I said earlier, I think this is the best movie version of this story by cutting through so much of the bullshit. Mad Love is a classic, but the way that Mad Love tried to make the story work was by like adding Pygmalion on top of it and like adding like this mad scientist falling in love with the wife thing. And it's like, I don't know if the problem of an overcomplicated story can be solved by adding more complications to it. So I think this is better than Mad Love. I think straight up this is the best Hands of Orlac. Mad Love's at 61, so that makes that my floor. Going up from there, at 55, there's Night of the Hunter, which is also an overly ambitious first-time movie from a filmmaker who didn't do much else, Charles Laughton. In his case, it's his only film. We, I think, ranked Night of the Hunter lower than people expected us to, but it is a beautiful movie, and it is well-respected and well-regarded for a lot of reasons, and I think it's better than this movie on a craft level and on a, like, experimenting with the form kind of level, and on the level of, like, coming up with memorable visuals and all these things. Right below Night of the Hunter is Curse of Frankenstein, which is the first Hammer Frankenstein.
Thank you.
Which is a really great movie that, of course, launched like a dynasty of Hammer horror movies and, you know, had the boldness to ask the question, hey, so since Frankenstein is like nobility, what if he was just terrible? So I think Curse of Frankenstein is better than this, which means that my ceiling is 56. So my range becomes 57 to 61.
Can you remind me of Terror is a Man, which is ranked at 57?
No, I cannot. Let me look it up.
So it has directors De Leon and Romero. If I remember correctly, that's because Romero was like maybe kind of ghost director.
So Terror is a Man, aka Blood Creature, aka Creature from Blood Island, is a Filipino horror movie about a shipwreck survivor washed ashore on a small island where a scientist is experimenting on a panther in an effort to make it human. It's Eddie Romero, not George Romero. It's sort of like a Dr. Moreau riff.
Yeah, this movie is from 1959, which in number-wise doesn't seem that far ago. But we covered it in episode 286. So
what episode is this? 350-ish?
340.
340. So a while ago. Yeah, I really don't remember a lot of this movie. Like, it's not ringing a ton of bells, even as I look at pictures from it. I'm going to be honest.
But it's ranked so high. How would we not remember?
Must have
Filipino, so like maybe because it's the first.
Yeah, and like I don't remember what we thought of it, but like had like kind of a Night of the Iguana sort of vibe to it with like the hot, island, and I don't know.
Maybe I'll need to go back and look at my notes for that one.
Yeah. It has the warning at the start that there's a scene so shocking that they suggest the squeamish close their eyes at the sound of the bell and reopen it when the bell rings again. But yeah, I don't remember a lot of it. I'm going to be honest with you. Right below that is Kaltiki. It, The Terror from Beyond Space. So many of those 50s movies have such like interchangeable titles. It's so difficult. That is the one that is Alien. It's just Alien, but it's the 50s.
Okay.
Where there's like the different levels of the spaceship and they're trying to keep the monster on certain levels.
Yeah. And Kaltiki was pretty cool with like its special effects and stuff. People like dissolve. They like dig too deep.
Yeah. Yeah, they find the Balrog.
Yeah. And then there's the Blob at 60.
Yeah, I feel like, Kaltiki was really cool. I feel like the Blob is a big point of like competition here.
It's also pretty thematically tight.
We're going to have to rewatch Terror is a Man because it is high up here for a movie that I have no memory of.
Yeah, I feel really bad that I don't remember it. So that's your range.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll talk about my range.
Okay.
So I also looked at 61 and Mad Love, and while I absolutely see where you're coming from, And I would say that Mad Love is probably my ceiling as a result. It's definitely, Hands of a Stranger is definitely better in like as a horror movie, but I don't think it's a good adaptation because it doesn't fully adapt the story, you know? I think that that's like a fair thing to do in an adaptation, but if you want to look at like Del Toro's Frankenstein, thematically a very, very accurate adaptation. Plot-wise or story-wise, or however you want to like differentiate those, not accurate at all.
Well, more accurate than most.
Than some, but I would probably put Kenneth Branagh's Mary Shelley's Frankenstein as more accurate.
Yes.
Not as good, but more accurate. In any case, okay, I'm getting...
But, you know, Mad Love, I think with both Mad Love and Hands of a Stranger, they both do something, which is they change the title, and in the case of Hands of a Stranger, all the other character names, and in that way give themselves permission to go off book, as it were, a little more, like Mad Love adds the love aspect, and Hands of a Stranger changes a lot of stuff. Yeah. Whereas like the two adaptations that are actually called Hands of Orlac stick much more closely to the story and kind of suffer for it.
I would agree. Looking below that, we have some pretty big hitters like Vampire or The Uninvited, even White Reindeer at 68.
Yeah, that's true. And these are all really good movies.
They are all really good movies. And I can't say in good faith that Hands of a Stranger is one note, because I do think it manages to amp things up as it goes on. But it just starts so hot and it's just a lot. And I think movies that have a bit more variation, or at the very least a release of that intensity, do a little better. Even The Screaming Skull, where like the release for me was laughter because I was enjoying it so much.
Yeah, Hands of a Stranger, like we talk a lot about the film noir beginning, but like the second scene in this movie is the doctors failing to save the life of the guy who was shot, and it's still Dr. Harding and him being like, you know,
God damn it.
Yeah, like why is it that we still cannot prolong man's life? Like being like super intense about this like failure, to the point where like when a cop comes by and is like, hey, that's the guy who was shot, right? What was cause of death? The doctor's like, get out of my way. Like, I don't want to talk to you. Like you know, whatever. Everyone is so intense immediately. Yeah. It's very true.
So I was thinking about the way that it handles tone in that way, and that led me to kind of go fairly low and lower, and my eyes came to The Man Who Changed His Mind at 108, of like, oh, Ben's eyebrows they just went up. The reason why I was looking in this area is because like right above that is The Leopard Man, and it has that really intense scene, but then a lot more variation through things. And it just felt like, you know, in terms of handling the need for that kind of variation in its script writing and its direction, I think the fact that this movie doesn't really handle that means that it suffers a bit, or at least my experience of it. This might be a little too low because I'm also seeing like Horrors of the Black Museum at 97, which is fairly tepid. But this movie, Hands of a Stranger, also like doesn't have a lot of blood.
Yeah, it doesn't give us as much on screen as I would have liked. That scene where the girl burns alive is wild, but like I wanted more. I wanted to see the mangled hands. Give me one Hands of Orlac adaptation where I see how fucked up his hands are.
We should have seen the mangled hands, especially because that's shown directly to Dina.
Yeah.
We should have heard some sound effects for the kid's hands getting crushed.
Yeah, he just screams, but we don't hear all the... Like, later we find out that every bone in his hands was broken. Yeah.
Yeah, we should have gotten more. Another movie that feels a little comparable is Dementia at 89. Comparable because it's like a little bit out there in terms of like who the heck is making this, and where did this come from? And being impressed by its confidence and by its filmmaking, but it's still being like not quite cohesive enough to fit very seamlessly on the list.
Okay, I'm going to propose you a spot.
Go for it.
I think the lowest I'm willing to go here is 72. Below The Flesh and the Fiends, which is a Burke and Hare riff, and above La Marca del Muerto, which is the old guy from the 1800s and his identical modern day counterpart who has to help him get women's blood to keep him looking youthful. That movie.
Yeah. Can I ask, or rather just like propose? Like I appreciate you coming down.
Mm-hmm.
Eyes Without a Face is at 69.
Yes.
And ultimately we were kind of disappointed with Eyes Without a Face because it was so like tepid and arty because it's so French. And this movie, Hands of a Stranger, feels very American, I think, by comparison.
Yeah.
What do we think about the way that the two movies, like, because Eyes Without a Face, that's an adaptation as well, right?
Yes.
And I think it streamlines pretty well, but it's still just like so...
I think we have to put Eyes Without a Face above this, even though I was literally being like, my whole range is above this earlier, because Eyes Without a Face is such a like renowned classic that inspired so much that came after it and is so well respected, and that element of it is not insignificant. I also think that I would be fine with putting this above The Screaming Skull because both of these movies are very low budget. I think The Screaming Skull is good, but I think Hands of a Stranger hides its low budget better. Like it's very obvious that The Screaming Skull was, I've got 2 actors, a car, a skull prop, and a big empty house for the weekend.
Oh, they also had that garden.
Right.
You know, the greenhouse. No, I agree.
So I'd go below Eyes Without a Face, but above Screaming Skull. Because, I mean, yeah, I just immediately thought I like this better than any other Hands of Orlac and immediately just started looking above Mad Love and totally missed that, like, dope movies like Phantom of the Opera and Vampire and The Uninvited are, like, right beneath Mad Love.
What's causing me to hesitate is The Flesh and the Fiends has a strangling scene, and I remember it being, like, pretty intense and shocking, and the strangling scenes in Hands of a Stranger are not. It's when I forget which one he plays, but Donald Pleasance is doing the deed,
right?
So I feel like maybe Flesh and the Fiends should go above, but that Hands of a Stranger should go right below.
Yeah, I don't think it should go below La Marca del Muerto, which is just like a riff on a type of movie we've seen a million times.
I would agree.
Okay, so then entering the list at the new number 72 is The Hands of a Stranger from 1962, written, produced, and directed by Newt Arnold.
If you would like to see this list, you can go to our website, screamscenepodcast.com. There you can find links to the many episodes that we have mentioned, as well as our appeals box. If you would like to contest this or any other ranking, if you want to shoot your shot about why Terror is a Man truly deserves its spot at number 70 because we are just blanking on it, please drop us a line by letting us know through our Ask box on Tumblr. You can email us at screamscenepodcast@gmail.com or talk to us through our Patreon or Blue Sky.
Scream Scene updates every other Wednesday on SoundCloud and many other podcatchers through our RSS feed. If you're having trouble getting access to the show through your regular podcatcher, let us know. But that should keep you up to date with the show if you follow the RSS feed. If you'd like to help out the show, you can do so by leaving us a rating or a review, sharing the show on social media or with your friends or in person. Word of mouth is the best way for us to grow our audience. And if you really like what we do, head on over to patreon.com/Scream Scene Podcast, where you can become a patron of the night for as little as $1 a month. Patrons at the $5 and $10 level get access to regular bonus content. I hear rumor that some new bonus content is coming down the pipes. So keep your eye out for that at patreon.com/Scream Scene Podcast.
So, Ben, what are we watching next week?
Well, next time, Sarah, we are watching yet another movie I've never heard of before. It's Night of the Eagle, a UK horror movie that was released in the US as Burn Witch Burn.
Ooh, that's a much better title than Night of the Eagle.
Well, we will see you then, creatures of the night.
Bye.
Bye.